Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Perrone, and I am going to be talking about planning a major change in a software system. So a bit of background about me: I'm a former Seneca student, I'm an employee at Blindside Networks, and I'm a Big Blue Button developer. And my presentation is about planning a major change in the software, and I'm going to be speaking from experience. The major change that I made was changing the video streaming service inside Big Blue Button. It's been a year-long task, and I hope to offer some insight to other people who are making a large change. So for those unaware, this is Big Blue Button. It's meant to replicate a classroom. It's meant to be a virtual classroom. So we are an open source project. It is a web conferencing system for distance education. It is Java and Flash based. And as I said, it's meant to replicate a virtual classroom. In the middle, we have a whiteboard. On the right side, we have a chat for students and professor communication. You have a list of users. You have the ability to share webcams and share a desktop, share your computer screen, and that is the change that I made, that video streaming service. So we are taking part in the HTML5 revolution. HTML5 technologies are everywhere. Everything is moving toward HTML5, and so are we. We are adopting WebRTC video to replace our older video standards, older video codecs, everything. WebRTC video, just a little bit about it, is a fast, peer-to-peer streaming video service. And inside Big Blue Button, video services integrate very deeply into our system. We have multiple clients, we have messaging systems, we have multiple databases, multiple servers, media servers. So video integrates very deeply into this system. And like I said, I've been working on this for just over a year now, so I hope that kind of shows the scale and the magnitude of how deeply this integrates. So I made a very simple diagram of how you make a software change. You go into your favorite editor, you make your change, you save it, and you deploy it. Unfortunately, it isn't as simple as that, but what I hope to explain is that it can be somewhat similar to this. You want to plan your software change out in various steps, and you don't want to leave any stone unturned. You want to, by the time you get to your development, you want everything to be known, so that way you can just go right into your development, and hopefully you'll be good to go very, very soon. So when you're planning a major change, there are multiple steps, and a good breakdown is what I have on the screen here. So the first one would be requirements gathering. This is one of the most important steps. You want to make sure that, like I said, by the time you get to your development, you've gathered everything that you need to know about your project. You want to know all about your resources, all about how your current system works, how your new feature or addition is going to work. You want to know everything so you can just get right into your development. The next step would be surveying your software. So requirements gathering would be learning about your current, or learning about what it is you are going to be doing, but you also need to know what you are going to do it to. So this comes into play if you are swapping out a software feature, or if you're adding a feature, if you're swapping out a component. It's very important to know what relies on what you're swapping out. So for me, replacing our video system required a lot of analysis of the video system currently, because it touches just about every feature and component of our software. And so you can't just go ripping that out and putting in something new and hoping that it'll work just fine. The next step would be designing. So after you know what it is you're going to be doing and where you're going to be implementing it, you want to know how. This includes how it's going to look, how it's going to behave, how it's going to behave to the user, how it's going to interact with the rest of your system. Just about everything aside from the code should be handled in your design phase. And one very important step is taking the necessary time to learn, because you won't always just be given a task that you know how to do. Speaking from experience, I did not know almost anything about WebRTC video or video in the project that I worked for. It's a very large project and not everyone knows every component. That's why there's different teams. You have marketing teams, development teams. You have so many different people working on such large projects that you don't always know what you work with every day. And when you are implementing something new, you might discover it is best to do it using something you don't actually know. And for me, I was using different frameworks, different languages, different softwares that I had to become familiar with. And I can say that taking the necessary time to learn how you are going to implement something is probably one of the best stages to take your time on, because you don't want to get 2 weeks into development and have to say to your boss, I need to go take 2 weeks to go learn what I'm using because I didn't bother to learn it before. You want to make sure that when you get to your development phase, you are sure of everything. You know how everything works. You know what it is you decided to use or you were told to use, so you can get right into it. It's fine to say to take 2 weeks, for example, to learn something new, but you don't want to have to do that after you've already started, because that can reflect very poorly on you. The next step would be development. And development should hopefully be a very easy step. It might be the longest step there is. It could be a couple days, couple weeks, couple years. But you want to make sure when you get to this development stage, you are good to go. So if you gather all your requirements, you know everything about what you're going to be doing, you know how it'll look, you know how it'll behave, you take the time to learn how you're going to do it, development can be easy. Yes, you will have to go back to some of these different stages, but that's fine, but you want to make sure your development can be as streamlined as possible, because you are just helping yourself. The next step is testing, which hopefully goes good. If you've planned everything properly and you've taken the time to learn everything, your testing should be very simple. Shouldn't always be something scary, shouldn't be something that will set you back. It should be nice to know that what you did works. So with requirements gathering, it's almost like writing a story. You have the 5 W's, you have how, who, what, when, where, why, how. And hopefully it is you, but the who could be you're working with someone else. The when, very important to know, because you might have a week or half a year or 2 years, and that helps with when you are gathering your requirements, you want to know if your client needs something done by the end of the week, or if they need something by the end of the year. What if they need part of it on one date, the rest of it can come later. So you need to know what your timeline is, so you can plan out major features, releases, milestones, and how much time you will give yourself. Why and how, in my opinion, speaking from my experience, the why and how are the most important steps. The how can determine, that's your learning phase, how you're going to do it. You might discover it is best to use a completely different language to implement a feature or a system that you don't know about. But how you do it can be better, or can be more important than just about anything else. The why, certainly speaking from experience, the why is something to always remember. If, in my case, with our new video streaming service, we wanted to adopt HTML5 video. Why? Well, it's faster, it's more efficient, it's more future-proof, it will integrate better, and it's required for us going forward. So that right there is something that should always be in the back of your mind, why you were doing this. And it was something that was always in the back of my mind. Why am I doing this in the first place? It's meant to be more efficient. And so I know if I get to any stage over the course of my year of development, if that why becomes compromised, if it is no longer as efficient as I knew it was supposed to be, I knew that something went wrong. Something went wrong with the design, or something went wrong with the development, or gathering my requirements, and I know that I need to somewhat backtrack. So why you were doing this is just something to always remember, because you want to examine that at every step of the way. Surveying your system. This becomes very important, especially if you're doing a swap or an addition in your software. If you are starting a system up from the ground up for a client, you might not have anything to survey, but generally no system just appears out of thin air. You will integrate with something. You will communicate with something else. But in the case of swapping a feature, in my case, completely swapping all our video communication, you have to learn how it currently works, because if you put in something new, something else could break that you did not even know touched it. In my case, our video system, it touched clients, it touched our servers, it touched our database, our communication, it touched everything. So before you go taking out something very important or very large, you need to know the extent of it. Where does it go? It's like if you try to take out a tree. You see the tree, but it has many roots that go very deep, and you need to know before you can replace it, what is it? And in my case, I spent a lot of time surveying our video system. I spent a lot of time learning what interacts with it, because the last thing I want to happen is to take out a very important part of our system and something else breaks that I didn't check because I figured it's not related. It shouldn't interact with it at all. And just as I said, what relies on your current system and what will need to be adapted. With me and my task of introducing new video, what will need to be adapted, that was just about everything. Our existing client needed to be adapted. Our new client needed to have room to put this in. So surveying is a step that is sometimes overlooked, but in my experience is one of the most important things. Design. This is a somewhat fun part of software development, but software developers might not always do this. This might be handed off to a different team, but at the end of the day, it's the programmers who are going to be doing it. So the UI and the UX. So your user interface, your user interaction, your This is where you can actually show off what you've done. If you design a feature, you design a software, if no one knows how to use it, it doesn't really serve a purpose. And with a lot of technologies today, companies spend a lot of time on UI and UX to make sure that their software is usable. And sometimes usable but basic software can be way more popular than complex feature load software. So this is a very important step. It could be handed over to your UI team or your user experience team, but as the person who would be implementing this, it's very important to know. When you're designing your business rules, well, what are business rules? Business rules would be, what can your software do? What can it not do? What is it supposed to do? If you are working on a banking system, can this system store information in its own database, or is that against the rules? Programming, this is the part about learning. When you're designing your system, you should examine all your options. Should you design it in a new language? Should you use a new framework? In my case, I was using new languages, new frameworks, new media servers, new things that I did not previously know about. But during the design phase, I realized that this would be, in the long run, superior to anything else we have. And so it is worth the time to investigate these new languages, investigate new frameworks, and don't always just stick to what you know. Resources, this comes into play when you're doing your requirements gathering, and then when you're designing, again, you need to reference your resources. And if you're designing a new system, you need to know how much memory will it use. When you're designing the system, will it require more hard drive space? Will it require any type of new resources? And designing security. Are you going to have security in this system? Is this just a feature? Is this just adding a small feature that doesn't actually need security because it's already surrounded by secure components? Or are you inserting something new that needs to have security all the way through? And again, this is the place you want to worry about this. You want to plan this out. So that way when you get to your implementation stage, you don't have any questions. So developing or learning, this is something that I've referenced a few times, and this is all from experience. You need to learn your current system, but once you've finished planning everything, should you get right into development, or should you take the time to learn? In my case, I took several months of learning something new, learning how to use a new server, how to use new languages, new frameworks, because I wanted to prepare myself. I wanted to make sure that when I get to my development stage, I can go full steam ahead. I don't have to backtrack or stop to learn something. I spent several months learning, so that way I could drastically reduce the time of development. Now, you should hopefully be on your way to developing. And again, there's swap versus addition. If you are adding software or building software versus swapping out software, I swapped out software. I swapped out a very large component. And it's always important to remember to build structured and build piece by piece, because I know many people, myself included, have a tendency to start very small, just inject a file or change a function call or change something to get your results, and you continue on. You just continue on, and then sometime down the road, it's impossible to do something else because of the way it was built. And when you start small like that, or when you start small but messy, and you build on it, it just becomes like a house of cards. One day you'll run into a situation where you need to change everything because you didn't plan it out properly from the beginning. I encountered this somewhat when I first started, because I couldn't simply change out this gigantic feature. I had to design it separately and try to bring it back over. And I tried to bring it back over piece by piece, as simple as I could without affecting anything else. But that involved a few messy tricks. And growing from there, I had to take the time to basically rewrite everything into a very neat way, which in the end was very beneficial, but I wish I would have started like that. You want to start small, but start structured, and modularity is key. You want to be able to swap out, if you're doing a swap out between old and new. If you are adding, you want to be able to add some feature without it affecting anything else. If you were building a house, you don't just build it and then someone comes and tells you you need to add a new room, but you didn't leave any room. You want to make sure that the framework and the foundation that you lay down will allow for expansion and just allow for continued development. Now you should be on your way to testing. And testing can be scary because if you just spent several months of developing time, you don't want to see what you created not work. And that can be scary, but at the same time, all those previous steps are to prepare yourself for this step. When you gather all your requirements, that is to prepare you for your design. And when you are designing, you are preparing yourself for your development. And your development should prepare you for your testing. So if you start from the beginning, preparing yourself all the way through, your testing should hopefully be very simple, very straightforward. And testing involves multiple things. Testing your existing system, testing the new software you have, and then testing full loop. Your system should hopefully already work, and then test your new software, and then test them together. Is there anything different? Do they behave differently together? Do they interact? Is there anything different? Are there any faults? And this is where you review your requirements. Are your requirements still valid? Do you need, when you're testing, do you realize you need more resources than before? Do you need more RAM than before? Does your software introduce any additional user interaction, any additional security information than previously thought? And so the results of your test will be the integrity of your application. Does it still work as intended? Is it still the software that you were planning on? And this testing stage is where you can get all your feedback. And I know, again, speaking from experience, testing can be scary. I'm in the testing phase of my WebRTC video. I spent several months of development, and before that, even more time of learning and planning And now I'm at the testing phase, which is a happy phase because I can send it off to people for testing and I get to hear back from people. Have they seen something that I didn't see? Did I miss something? Does it work exactly as they expected? Is it missing something? And feedback, not everyone always likes to hear feedback, but it's the most important thing. Because if you just spent a long time creating something, you want to be happy with it. You want to be proud of it. You want your work to be used. And so after testing, you're done, right? Well, not exactly. Yes, you are somewhat done, but you're never completely done. You never just finish something and ship it off and just forget about it. After testing, you have your maintenance. You maintain your software for the lifetime. If your testing went excellent and your code, your software, your feature is now going to be used and from your clients are now going to be using this, you will have to maintain it because over the course of years of people using your software, they'll find issues. Users always find certain issues and you need to maintain your software. And as you see this diagram, full loop, because as soon as you finish your testing and you move on to your maintenance, you begin developing again, whether you're developing the same thing or you're developing something else. But this loop never ends, and the hope is that you spend more time at each of the beginning phases, so when you get toward the end, when you get toward your implementation, your testing and integration, your maintenance, they go as smoothly and as quickly as possible. And one other important thing that you learn while developing software is that every single phase is not on its own. Every phase leads into the next one, but when you are toward the end, you still sometimes need to go back. Because when you are implementing, you may see you need to plan out something new. What if you got told of a new feature you need, or you were implementing something and it just can't be done? Or you are testing and you have an issue. Well, then you need to go back to your planning phase. You don't just go back and try to fix your code. You want to realize what happened. Where did this issue come up? Why did it come up? And so you hope to go forward, but at the same time, it is perfectly fine to go back. And I have realized this with my work where I'm now on my testing phase, and hopefully we'll move on to maintenance soon, where this will be in the hands of our users, in the hands of professors and students using this video streaming. And this is a complex system. And if issues become found, it's good to go back right to the planning stage, because if something goes wrong, yes, you can just go find out your bug and fix it, but you'd like to know where did this come up? Because, like I said, each stage should prepare you for the rest. And if something went wrong, you want to prepare yourself for the future. You want to make sure that this will not happen again. You want to make sure that each step of the way is not just preparing you for the next step, it's preparing you for your next time. The next time you implement software, you will be able to do it faster, because you know your planning stage can come back to bite you if you skip it. Or if you skip over your testing, your maintenance might not even be existent, because it might not be possible to maintain it. You might have to start right over again. And I learned, this was the first time I did a very large change in software, changing this video streaming service, and I learned that every single stage here is just as important as the one before it. And some of these things you might think you can skip over. If you are making a quick little feature, you might think, just do the design, get right into the implementation, and test it. But especially if you're working with a client who requests a feature, or a client who is paying money over a contract requesting something, you don't want to skip over your requirements, over your planning, because it's not just your users who could be upset, it could be your client. And at the end, the whole point is to make good software, and your maintenance should hopefully be your easiest, and it should be the most rewarding step when you've been able to flow through this, flow through all these steps and people are using your software. That should be the happiest time. So for me, I hope to get onto maintenance soon so people can start using my software. I hope that people can start using our video because we are launching a new client, and that can't be done without the WebRTC video that I did. And so maintenance, I'll be able to see people who were not able to receive an online education before due to network limitations. They may be able to see their professor for the first time. And that's pretty much it. I learned so much over the course of a year, and this was something that I always referenced, and I know for sure I will reference it every time from now on. And I hope that when other people are creating software, especially something very important that will be used by other people, they do not overlook anything, because I have learned that you do not want to skip over anything. You want your software to be used, and I hope it will be. And I hope that for any programmers who study something like this, they have a very good time doing it. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've gone through probably 5 phases now, or your 5th phase of your development cycle. Which part took you personally the longest on this project?
Personally, what took me the longest was my learning stage, because I was assigned a new feature replacing video, which is very complex, and I had to use languages I didn't know. I had to use a brand new media server called FreeSwitch. They implemented video transmission, which I'd never used before. I had to use brand new libraries. I developed Big Blue Button. I work on our HTML5 client. I also needed to implement this in our older Flash-based system. And I spent so much time learning, as well as the nature of open source is it's always being developed. There's always people adding to it. While I was trying to study this software before I could even use it in our system, I needed to study this software to replicate it and then try to put it into our software. And while I'm doing that, over the course of the year, it underwent many major changes. And I spent so much time just learning, so much time testing how it works on its own. But that was sort of what I was trying to, my main point here was I learned about some of these steps in school, that chart, but the learning phase was typically overlooked because you typically will not be assigned a contract to develop software, or your boss might not tell you to do something that you don't know. But it happens. It happened to me, and I'm sure it happens to a bunch of people who maybe they move teams, they launch a brand new app, and they need to learn. And you might think you can skip over it, but in the end, you're just punishing yourself, really. And the question, what took me the longest, it was learning, but that's sort of what I wanted to talk about, which was learning is actually one of the most important steps you can do, because any programmer, regardless of what language they know, there is so much more about that language they don't know. Every person in this room can name 100 JavaScript packages, and there's thousands more. So learning, definitely.
So what was the biggest challenge that you remember from this project?
There were many. I would say it was also the learning, because I learned so many things I'd never looked at before, so many things I didn't really even know existed. And the biggest challenge was trying to take in so many different softwares that a lot of these softwares and technologies that I used, they are only used by a handful of people in the world. They serve a specific task, and they are excellent at completing that, but very few people use them. So the resources were very scarce. If I wanted to ask something, there's no Google, there's no Stack Overflow. You need to directly contact the person who did it, because they're the only person that knows it. And that's the role that I'm taking on now, where I've taken those softwares and put them together, and I'm now one of the few people who knows how these things interact. And when I try to Google for help, I just find myself asking questions on Google, because that was the most difficult part, I think, just trying to learn everything.
So comparatively, design was easier than learning?
Yeah, actually the design was fairly simple. We have a user interface guy, and my boss knew what we wanted, so our design was actually pretty simple. We knew we were going to use a language, use a server, use a framework. Design was probably the easiest step. Before that, there was the planning, which was very long. There was the development, which was fairly long, but planning or design was quick and very fun. Design is one of the most interesting parts of developing software.
Any other questions?
Yeah?
So was there a lot of architectural design work in this re-implementation, or were you basically swapping out the old video part and putting in the new video part?
Both.
Yeah.
So we're implementing HTML5 in JavaScript video, which putting it into our, we have a video system which was designed and implemented over the course of multiple years. It was very sturdy. And the plan was to mimic and recreate that structure, but at the same time, being so different, it involved a lot of new engineering and solving new issues that did not exist before. And so when you're making a swap, if you can keep structure, that makes it very easy. But you can't always do it, which is, like I said, that learning phase, if you are using like a new language, like I was, new framework, you spend the time to learn how, you might not think you can do something, but if you spend the time learning, you might realize you can. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.